Please tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I would love to interact with you legends. Now to the story. I met this guy on a dating app about 2 weeks ago. His name was Drew. He looked normal, maybe a bit too well put together for my usual type, but I've been trying to give people more of a chance lately. We met at this small Italian restaurant that had low lighting and brick walls, the kind that tries to make you feel like you're somewhere special. He was already there when I arrived, sipping water and scrolling through his phone like he'd been waiting for hours. Dinner was fine. Not great, not bad, just fine. He talked a lot about his job, how stressful it was, how hard he worked, how most girls didn't understand his lifestyle. I mostly nodded and picked at my pasta, pretending to be more interested than I really was. The only weird thing he did during dinner was when the waiter came over, and he immediately called him by name, even though the guy never introduced himself. He just looked at his name tag and started using it like he'd known him forever. After we ate, he asked if he could walk me home. I said no. He didn't take it well. He made this face, the kind that says, "Don't be ridiculous," and stood up like it was already decided. I told him again, firmer this time, that I'd order a rideshare. He finally said, okay, but looked annoyed, like I'd ruined his plans. The driver showed up a few minutes later, an older guy with gray hair and a nervous smile. He didn't talk much, just drove quietly through the streets. I remember looking out the window the whole ride, half listening to some soft radio playing in the background. When we got to my building, I thanked him and went inside. He waited until I got to the door before pulling away. That's what made me feel safe enough to forget about it. I showered, changed into pajamas, scrolled through my phone for a bit, then crashed on the couch. Around midnight, I got up to grab a glass of water and noticed something weird. Faint headlights through the curtains. I thought maybe someone was dropping someone off, but the light didn't move. I peeked out just a little and saw the same black car from earlier. It was parked across the street, engine running, no hazard lights. Nothing. At first, I tried to calm myself down. Maybe he lived nearby. Maybe he was on a call. My brain started trying to make it sound logical because that's what you do when something doesn't feel right. But then I leaned closer to the window and saw movement inside the car. 2 people, both in the front seats. The driver was there, hands on the wheel, and in the passenger seat, my date. They were laughing, like they were sharing some inside joke. I froze. It didn't even register properly at first. I thought maybe it was just my mind mixing things up, like maybe I was overtired. I squinted and focused, trying to see clearly through the glass. The passenger leaned forward, and the light from the dashboard hit his face. It was him. Drew. My stomach dropped. I backed away from the window fast and just stood there, staring at the wall like it would help me think. Why were they together? How'd that even happen? The driver had picked me up straight from the restaurant. I didn't order through the app that Drew had access to. It was my own account. So how did he end up with the same guy? I turned off all my lights, hoping they wouldn't see movement inside. My heart was pounding so loud it felt like it was echoing in my ears. I wanted to call someone, but who do you even call for something like that? The police would probably think I was being paranoid, so I sat there in the dark, waiting to see if they'd leave. But they didn't. They just sat there for what felt like forever. Sometimes the headlights would dim like the engine was being turned off, then come back on again. I started hearing faint music from outside, not loud, but enough to make me realize they were just sitting there listening to something, together. Then the passenger door opened. Drew stepped out. He leaned against the car, smoking something, and kept looking up at my building. I don't know if he could see me through the curtains, but it felt like he could. Every time he tilted his head up, I had to fight the urge to duck behind the couch. He looked relaxed, too relaxed, like he was waiting for something. After a while, he got back in the car, and they drove off slowly, not fast, just creeping down the street until they disappeared around the corner. I stayed frozen on the couch for a long time. Even when I couldn't hear the car anymore, I kept listening, just in case. When I finally went to bed, I left the light on. It took me forever to fall asleep, and every time I heard a noise outside, I felt my chest tighten. The next morning, I checked my phone first thing. I had a message from Drew saying he had a great time. Nothing else. No mention of the weird ending, no apology, no explanation. Just that he'd love to see me again soon. I deleted it without replying. That same morning, I opened the rideshare app to see if I could find anything weird about the trip history. My ride from last night was gone, like it never happened. No record of it. My previous trips were all there, but not that one. The driver's name didn't show up anywhere. Later that day, when I walked to grab coffee, I noticed a black car parked at the corner of my street again. I didn't look inside. I just kept walking like I hadn't seen it. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. Every time a car passed by, I'd peek out from behind the curtain, checking the color, the lights, the sound of the engine. I don't even know what I was expecting to see. Maybe nothing. Maybe both of them again, laughing. I stopped using the app after that. Deleted it from my phone completely. A few days later, my friend told me she'd matched with someone named Drew who worked in the same area mine did. When she showed me his profile, it was the same guy, same smile, same restaurant photo. I didn't tell her what happened. I just said I met him once and that he wasn't my type. But every time I walk home now, I still check the reflections in car windows. Not for my own safety exactly, but just to make sure I'm not being laughed at again from the dark. I should have trusted the weird gut feeling I had before even getting there. The plan was simple. Wine, music, maybe a movie. We'd been texting for a week or so, and she seemed cool. Her name was Amber. She had this chill, easy vibe online, like she wasn't trying too hard, which made me think she was different from most people I had met through dating apps. She sent me her address earlier that day, a flat in a quiet part of town, near some old shops that always looked half closed. I almost canceled when I saw the long dark road leading up to it, but my brain told me to stop overthinking. When I got there, she opened the door wearing a baggy hoodie, barefoot, holding a glass of wine already half gone. The place looked normal, dim lights, candles on the table, a few boxes stacked in the corner like she'd just moved in. There was music playing softly, something slow. She told me to sit wherever, so I did. She poured me some wine, and for the first few minutes it felt normal. She laughed at everything, maybe too much, like she was nervous or trying to fill silence. Her hands kept shaking a little when she refilled her glass, but I didn't want to comment on it. People get anxious on first dates, right? Then came the knock. Not loud, not aggressive. Just a few short taps like someone who already knew they were welcome. She didn't even look surprised. She didn't pause the music, didn't check who it was, just got up slowly and walked to the door. I thought it was a roommate or a friend stopping by. When she opened it, two men walked in. Not rushing, not sneaking, just walking. Like this was normal. Both were older than her, maybe late 30s, and dressed casual, jeans and hoodies. They didn't look at me at first. One of them went straight to the fridge like he lived there. The other sat down on the arm of the couch, right near me. Amber came back into the room holding her wine glass and said something I'll never forget. She said not to worry, that they just wanted to meet me. I laughed for half a second because I thought it was some kind of weird joke, but the look in her eyes wasn't playful. She was serious and kind of zoned out, like she wasn't really there. The guy sitting near me leaned back, watching the way people watch something before deciding what to do with it. His hands were resting together, and I noticed the tattoos on his knuckles, lock letters, one on each finger. The other guy pulled out two more wine glasses from the cupboard without asking and started pouring himself and the first guy drinks. Nobody said anything for a while. Amber stood next to the counter, sipping her wine and occasionally glancing at me. The air felt heavier than it should have, like it was pressing down on my chest. My brain was racing, trying to figure out if this was some weird prank or if I should just leave. The one near the couch finally spoke, his tone calm and slow. He started asking me random things. Where I worked, where I was from, if I lived alone. Stuff that sounded harmless until I realized how detailed his questions were getting. He was repeating some of my answers back, like he was storing them in his head. Amber just stood there, never interrupting, never reacting. Every time I looked her way, she smiled faintly, like she was pretending to be relaxed but didn't want to make eye contact. I asked if everything was okay, but nobody answered. The guy at the fridge kept walking back and forth behind me, like he was checking stuff, opening drawers, moving things around for no reason. That's when I started to notice small things that didn't add up. The boxes I'd seen earlier were moving boxes. They were taped shut with labels on them. One said records. Another said phones. The table had little scratches in the wood, like someone had dragged metal tools across it. The walls were almost empty except for a single photo near the hallway. 3 people, smiling. Amber was one of them. The other two were the guys in the room. I stood up slowly, pretending to stretch. The guy on the couch shifted, like he was making sure I didn't move too fast. I said I needed to use the bathroom just to get some space. He nodded, but kept his eyes on me. In the hallway, everything felt even quieter. I could still hear the music faintly from the other room. I didn't go to the bathroom. I went straight for the front door. The handle was cold. When I turned it, it wouldn't move. I tried again, slower this time, pretending to adjust it so it wouldn't make noise. Locked, from the outside. I turned around and saw Amber standing behind me. She wasn't holding her glass anymore. Her voice was quiet, almost like she didn't want the others to hear. She said something about not being scared, about them wanting to make sure I wasn't one of them. I didn't know what that meant, but she looked terrified saying it. Then one of the guys called her name from the living room. Her whole body stiffened. She walked back quickly, leaving me there by the door. I didn't follow. I just stood there, staring at the lock, my heart hammering. I heard them talking, but I couldn't make out the words. Then I heard a laugh, low, mocking, and not from her. A few seconds later, someone started walking back toward the hallway. I ducked into the bathroom and shut the door quietly. I sat on the floor, breathing through my hands so they wouldn't hear. I heard footsteps stop outside the door, then silence. A few seconds passed, then the sound of something metallic tapping the wall near me. Tap, tap, tap. I stared at the bottom gap of the door, waiting to see if someone's feet would appear. They didn't. After what felt like an hour, I heard the front door open. I waited another minute, then another. Nothing. I didn't move until I was sure it was quiet. When I finally opened the door, the living room lights were off. The candles were melted down. The glasses were gone. The only thing left on the table was an empty wine bottle and a small black phone with no case. The door was unlocked now. I didn't even think. I just left. Outside, the street was empty. My car was still parked where I left it. I got in and started it without looking back at the building. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the keys. When I got home, I checked my phone and blocked her number, but her profile was already gone. Messages, pictures, everything. Just deleted. I searched the address online. It came out as a rental listing that hadn't been occupied in months. I never found out who the two guys were or what they wanted, but I can still see their faces when I close my eyes. The weirdest part is that sometimes when I scroll through dating apps now, I'll see new profiles pop up with her photo. Different names each time, same eyes, same smile. I wasn't even supposed to go out that night. My friend had been on my case for weeks about putting myself out there, so I finally gave in and agreed to meet this guy from an app. His name was Mason. His profile looked harmless. A few photos of him hiking, one with a dog, one at some cafe. Nothing weird. He suggested this new place that had just opened downtown. Said it was quiet, kind of hidden, and that the food was supposed to be really good. When I pulled up, the place looked smaller than I expected. It was tucked between two closed shops, with a dim yellow sign that just said The Hollow Fork. The windows were tinted, and I couldn't see inside. I almost texted him to change spots, but he messaged saying he was already there, so I went in. The second I stepped inside, the air felt different. Heavy, almost too warm. The lighting was soft and yellow, and every table had a candle. There weren't many people there. Maybe 4 other couples, all eating quietly. Nobody really talking. The walls were this weird faded cream color with old framed photos of people eating. I couldn't tell if they were real customers or staged pictures. Mason waved me over from the corner. He looked the same as his pictures, maybe a little paler. He stood up, pulled out my chair, and smiled like he'd been waiting for me all day. I tried to relax, telling myself it was just dinner and nothing more. The waiter came almost instantly. No menus, just asked what kind of food we liked. Mason ordered for both of us before I could even say anything. Some kind of house special. I remember thinking it was strange it didn't have a menu, but I let it go. The first course came fast. A soup that smelled faintly like burnt garlic. It tasted fine, I guess, but I couldn't figure out what it was made of. The texture was thick, almost gritty. Mason ate his like he hadn't eaten in days. He kept watching me between bites, smiling a little too much. The main dish came out next, some kind of steak. It was cut into perfect cubes, already plated neatly with dark sauce. The waiter didn't speak, just placed it down and walked away. The whole time, the other table stayed quiet, forks clinking softly, no one saying a word. About halfway through, I started feeling weird. Not sick, just uneasy. Something about the air felt off, like it wasn't being circulated properly. I told Mason I was going to use the bathroom. He just nodded, still chewing. When I got up, I noticed something strange. The waiter near the kitchen turned his head to watch me walk. His eyes followed me all the way to the hallway, not blinking once. The bathroom sign was near the entrance, but when I got to the door, I noticed something else. The front door, the one I'd come in through, had a chain across it now. Not locked with a key, but chained shut like a gate. I grabbed the handle anyway and tried to open it. Nothing. It didn't move an inch. I looked around for staff, thinking maybe it was temporary, maybe for safety. That's when one of the waiters walked over slowly, still wearing the same calm expression. He said something that made my stomach twist. That dinner wasn't finished yet. I thought he was joking, so I tried to laugh, but he didn't move or smile. He just stood there, blocking the exit. His eyes looked glassy, like there was nothing behind them. I turned back toward the dining area, and suddenly everything looked different. The other couples weren't talking or eating anymore. They were all just sitting there, facing forward, heads slightly tilted down. Their plates were empty. The candles flickered weirdly, making shadows dance across the walls. Mason was still at our table, but now he was staring right at me, not smiling, just blank. The waiter motioned for me to go back to my seat. I hesitated, and two other staff members appeared from the kitchen, both wearing the same fake polite smile. None of them blinked. None of them said anything else. I sat down again because my brain couldn't figure out what else to do. Mason leaned forward slightly, his eyes wide, and told me, in this calm, quiet tone, that they didn't like when people left early. I didn't even process it fully at the time. I was too focused on the fact that one of the couples across the room wasn't moving at all. Their heads were tilted the same way, and their hands were frozen midair, still holding utensils. The next course came out. The waiter placed it right in front of me, a plate of something that looked like thinly sliced meat, drizzled with the same dark sauce. It didn't smell right. My stomach turned. Mason started eating again, slowly this time, his eyes fixed on me like he was waiting for me to do the same. I pushed the plate away and stood up. The waiters didn't move, but the music stopped. I didn't even notice music playing before that moment, but suddenly everything went quiet. All I could hear was the low hum of the lights above me. I walked toward the kitchen. I don't even know why. Maybe because it felt like the only place I could go. The second I pushed the door open, the smell hit me. Metallic and sour, like raw meat left out too long. The room was filled with smoke, not from cooking, but from some machine running in the corner. There were tables, metal trays, knives laid out neatly, and piles of something that didn't look like food. Then I saw it, a hand, not moving, pale and limp on the counter beside the cutting board. I stumbled back and nearly tripped over something soft. It was a bag, clear plastic, filled with what looked like clothes. Before I could run, someone grabbed my arm. It was Mason. He looked calm, but not like himself anymore. His expression was blank, eyes wide open but unfocused, like he was somewhere else entirely. I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. The waiter came over too, whispering something I couldn't make out. I don't even remember how I got out. I think I screamed. I think I shoved someone and ran through the kitchen door to the back. I remember falling onto the pavement behind the restaurant and scraping my knees. The door behind me slammed shut, and the sound echoed down the alley. When I turned around, the windows were dark again. It looked completely empty, like nobody was ever there. I ran to the main street, called a friend, and waited at a bus stop until sunrise. The next day, I tried to find the place again, but it was gone. Same street, same spot, but there was just an empty store with boards on the windows and a faded "for lease" sign hanging sideways. I told myself maybe I went to the wrong street, maybe I'd imagined the whole thing, but every time I close my eyes, I can still see that hand on the counter. And sometimes when I walk through town at night, I swear I smell that same burnt garlic scent in the air, like it's following me, waiting for me to come back and finish dinner. Hey guys, really sorry to interrupt. If you're still listening, then you're enjoying the story so far. And if you are enjoying, then please hit that like button. That's all I ask of you. Thanks so much. Now back to the stories. I met her on a random Thursday night, the kind of day where nothing feels like it's supposed to happen. Her name was Kayla, at least that's what she told me. We matched on an app the week before, and everything about her seemed weirdly normal. Not over the top, not fake. She texted in lowercase, never used emojis, and always replied just slow enough to make me think she didn't care. That's probably why I said yes when she suggested dinner. She picked the place. Some quiet spot downtown called Elora's Table. I'd never heard of it, but she said it had a calm vibe and good pasta. When I got there, the place was almost empty. A few people scattered around, but the lighting was soft and dim, like the kind of place where people whispered instead of talked. She was already sitting at a table near the back, facing the door. She looked exactly like her pictures, which was rare enough to be unsettling. Long hair, small silver hoop earrings, and this blank but confident look on her face. No nervous fidgeting, no small talk about traffic or the menu, just stillness. We talked a bit about normal things, work, food, random stories. But the whole time, I noticed she didn't ask many follow-up questions. It was like she already knew the answers. When the drinks came, she asked me to hold her purse for a second while she went to the bathroom. I laughed because it was small, at a clutch. I didn't want to be that guy holding a purse at the table. But she just smiled and slid it over before walking off. The purse was light, like it didn't even have anything in it. I placed it beside me and didn't touch it. She was gone for maybe 10 minutes, maybe less. When she came back, everything seemed normal again. She asked a few random questions about my phone case, my watch, and the color of my wallet when I paid for the first round of drinks. I didn't think much of it at the time. Dinner went fine, I guess. A little quiet, but fine. She didn't eat much, though. Kept pushing food around with her fork and watching me instead. Every time I looked up, her eyes were already on me. Not in a creepy way, just steady, like she was studying something. When the bill came, I reached into my back pocket for my wallet. Same black leather one I've had for years. I opened it without thinking, grabbed my card, and froze. My ID wasn't there. My debit card, my credit card, all gone. Instead, there were cards I didn't recognize, a driver's license, a library card, even a gym membership, all with her name on them. Kayla's, her photo, her address, her signature. For a few seconds, my brain couldn't process it. I stared at the wallet like it was a magic trick gone wrong. I thought maybe I'd grabbed the wrong one, maybe it was hers, maybe there was some weird mix-up. But no, it was my wallet. The scratches on the leather were the same. The small tear on the inside corner was still there. Just everything inside had changed. I looked up and she was already watching me. Her expression didn't move. No confusion, no surprise. Just this calm stare that made my throat go dry. I wanted to ask her what was going on, but I couldn't get the words out. She reached across the table, slow and casual, and took the wallet from my hand. Then she opened her purse, the same one I'd been holding earlier, and dropped it inside. She zipped it up, leaned back in her seat, and smiled. I could feel my pulse in my ears. I checked my pockets again, hoping my real wallet was somewhere else, but it wasn't. My phone was still there, but suddenly I didn't even want to touch it. I didn't want her to see what was on it. She stood up before I could say anything. Told me she had to leave because she had an early start. She didn't even pretend to reach for her bag. Just looked at me, then at the waiter, and walked toward the door. When she left, I sat there for a full minute staring at the empty chair. The waiter came by and placed the bill on the table. I told him something weird had just happened, that I needed to check something, but he just nodded like he'd heard it before. I opened my phone to check my banking app, but it was locked out. It said my password had been changed 5 minutes ago. Same thing with my email. My notifications started flooding in one after another, security alerts, logins from unknown locations, password resets. I grabbed my jacket and ran outside. The street was empty. No Kayla, no sign of her car, just a row of flickering streetlights and the sound of traffic blocks away. I tried to call my bank, but when they asked for my security info, I realized I couldn't remember any of it. My mind was blank. Even the number on the back of my card, gone from memory. I went home still thinking maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe someone hacked me. Maybe it wasn't her. But when I got inside, something didn't feel right. My apartment door was unlocked. I swore I'd locked it before leaving. Everything inside looked the same, except my desk. My documents, folders, all gone. In their place, a single envelope. Inside it were my ID cards. My actual ones. Except the photo wasn't me anymore. It was her. Same pose, same background, same name, but her face. I don't remember sleeping that night. I just sat there staring at them until morning. The next day, I went to the police. They asked for proof of who I was. I handed over my passport, but it didn't work. It was the same, my name, my date of birth, but her face. They said they couldn't do anything without ID that matched me. They thought I was joking at first. One of them even asked if it was some kind of prank. When I got home, I checked my phone again. Every account was locked, every lodging gone. Even my contacts were replaced. Hundreds of numbers, all with her name. No duplicates, just Kayla, over and over. That night, someone knocked on my door. I didn't answer. The knocking went on for a long time, then stopped. When I looked through the window, there was a small black purse sitting on the floor outside. My wallet was inside it, empty again. Now, every time I look at my reflection, I hesitate for a second, because it doesn't always look the same. Sometimes under certain light, I swear her face flickers over mine, like she's still there watching, waiting for me to hand something else over. It sounded too good to be real from the start. I wasn't used to people like her showing interest in me. Her name was Layla, and we'd matched for only 2 days before she suggested meeting. No small talk, no awkward back and forth. She said she wanted something different, and I figured that meant she didn't like wasting time. She picked the spot, a fancy hotel bar downtown. One of those places where everything feels too polished and the staff act like they're serving ghosts instead of people. I got there early, trying not to look out of place. Everyone around me looked like they had somewhere better to be. I kept checking my phone, half expecting her to cancel. But then she walked in. She was wearing this long black coat and carried herself like she already knew how the night was going to go. She spotted me instantly and smiled like we'd known each other for ages. There was something weirdly familiar about her face, like I'd seen her somewhere before, maybe online, maybe in passing. We ordered drinks. Hers came in one of those thin glasses that looks like it's meant to be held by someone who doesn't actually drink. She barely touched it. I asked a few questions about her job, her hobbies, all that basic stuff. She answered, but her eyes kept drifting around the room like she was waiting for someone else. About 20 minutes in, she pulled a small card out of her purse and slid it across the table. A hotel room key. Room 212. She said I should meet her up there after I finished my drink. I thought it was a joke at first, but the way she looked at me made it feel more like an instruction. I tried to act calm, like this kind of thing happened all the time. I waited a few minutes before going up, just to not seem too eager. The elevator felt slower than usual. My reflection in the metal doors looked nervous no matter how many times I adjusted my face. When I got to the second floor, the hallway was empty, carpeted, dimly lit, lined with identical doors. Room 212 was halfway down. I could hear faint music from one of the rooms nearby, but everything else was silent. When I tapped the keycard, the green light blinked and the door clicked open. I pushed it gently, expecting to see her waiting or maybe getting ready. Instead, 3 people were sitting on the bed. 2 men and a woman. None of them moved when I stepped in. They just watched me, all dressed in black, all sitting too still. I froze in the doorway, thinking maybe I had the wrong room. I checked the number again, 212, the right one. The air felt different inside. The curtains were drawn tight, but light from the street seeped through the cracks, slicing across the room in thin lines. The TV was on, showing a blank blue screen. The woman on the bed tilted her head slightly, and one of the men stood up. He smiled, but it didn't look friendly, just stretched lips like he practiced it. I stammered something about looking for Leela, but they didn't answer. The man who stood started walking toward me, slow, calm, like he had nowhere else to be. I stepped back into the hall, my heart hammering. But before I could leave, the door swung wider from inside. Leela appeared. She was calm, holding a glass of wine now, acting like nothing was out of place. She said something quiet to them, and they stopped moving. The man sat back down. She smiled at me, the same smile she gave when she first walked into the bar. Then she stepped aside, motioning for me to come in. I didn't move. Something deep in my chest told me not to. She frowned slightly, as if I was being rude, and took a step closer. Her perfume was heavy, that expensive kind that lingers too long. She looked up at me and said something I didn't catch, but her tone was almost soothing, like she was trying to calm me down. That's when I noticed it. On the nightstand beside the bed was a small stack of wallets, neatly arranged in a pile. There were phones, two different brands, all face down. The man nearest the wall had a small camera set up on a tripod. Not a professional one, just the kind people use for vlogs. The red light was blinking. I told her I was leaving. She didn't stop me. She just watched as I stepped backward down the hall, that faint smile never leaving her face. When I reached the elevator, I pressed the button over and over, trying not to look back. The doors took forever to open. When they finally did, I got inside and stared at the numbers as they went down. The lobby looked different when I came out. Emptier, somehow darker even though the lights were still on. I didn't see the bartender, the guests, or even the receptionist. It was just me and the faint hum of the ceiling lights. I walked straight out the front doors, didn't even look back at the bar where we'd been sitting earlier. My car was parked down the street. I didn't run, but every step felt heavier. When I finally got in and locked the doors, I sat there trying to catch my breath. After a few minutes, I pulled out my phone. No messages from her. No missed calls. I opened the dating app to lock her profile, but it was gone. No matches, no chat history, nothing. I scrolled through my photos just to check something. The picture I'd taken earlier that day, the one of me in my car smiling before heading out, was gone too, replaced by a blurry photo I didn't remember taking. It was of me sitting at the bar, alone. In the reflection behind me, 3 figures stood watching. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I kept checking the keycard in my jacket pocket, the one she'd given me. I thought I'd left it on the table, but somehow it was still with me. On the back, scratched faintly into the plastic, were 4 numbers. 2132. I searched the hotel online the next morning. Every listing said it was permanently closed for renovations. When I called the number, it went straight to a disconnected tone. Later that day, I got a text from an unknown number. Just one sentence. Next time, don't be late. That night, I threw the keycard away. But when I woke up the next morning, it was back on my nightstand. Same scratches. Same faint smell of her perfume. Now I keep it in a drawer, taped shut. But sometimes when I walk past, I swear I can hear faint knocking from inside, like someone's waiting for me to come back upstairs to finish the night I didn't stay for. I didn't think anything of it at first. It was one of those last-minute decisions that didn't seem like a big deal until it was too late. We just finished dinner, nothing fancy, just a quiet Italian place on the edge of town. Her name was Emily. We'd been talking online for a couple of weeks before deciding to meet. She seemed normal, funny even, but in that overly polite kind of way that makes you think she's still trying to figure you out. Dinner went fine. She asked me a lot of questions about my family, my job, what kind of music I liked. She didn't talk about herself much, but I didn't really notice until later. When we finished, I offered to drive her home, and she said sure, but that she added something that threw me off a bit. She asked if I'd come inside just to say hi, said it would be quick. It sounded harmless. I figured maybe she just didn't want to seem rude or wanted to prove to her parents she wasn't out with some random stranger. I agreed because I didn't want to make it weird. Her house was about 15 minutes away, deep in a residential area I'd never been to before. The kind of place where every house looked almost the same. Neat front lawns, quiet streets. No noise except for the sound of sprinklers. Her house stood out though. All the windows were lit up, like every light inside was on. She told me to park right in front. As soon as I did, I noticed there were cars already lined up on both sides of the street, like a family gathering or something. I asked if there was an event, and she just smiled and said it was nothing big. When we got to the door, I noticed a faint smell of frosting and candles. She didn't even knock, just turned the handle and pushed it open like she lived alone. The first thing that hit me was the sound. People talking, laughing, plates clinking. And then, almost in perfect timing, everything went quiet. Every single person in the room turned to look at me. There must have been at least 10 of them. An older couple at the head of the table, 2 younger women, a few kids, and a man who looked like her dad, standing behind a large cake with lit candles. Then, in this soft, drawn-out tone, they started singing. Welcome to the family. Not happy birthday. Not a joke. The same phrase over and over. Welcome to the family. It sounded rehearsed, like they'd been practicing it. I froze near the doorway, unsure if I was supposed to laugh or say something. Emily was smiling, standing beside me with her hands clasped together. Her face looked calm, like this was exactly how it was supposed to go. The song ended, and everyone clapped lightly, still staring. I could feel my pulse in my neck. I tried to make a joke about it, but no one responded. The older woman, her mom, I guessed, stood up and walked toward me. She held out a slice of cake on a paper plate. Vanilla with white icing. I didn't take it. She just kept holding it out until it started to tilt in her hand. Emily gently nudged my arm, whispering that I should sit down for a minute. Against every instinct in my body, I sat. The family stayed perfectly still for a moment before returning to their seats. The cake was placed back in the center of the table, and the candles kept burning even though no one had blown them out. I tried to glance at my phone under the table, but there was no signal. It showed one bar for a second, then nothing. Her dad asked where I worked, but the question didn't sound genuine. It sounded like a test. Every time I answered, the rest of them nodded slowly all at once, like they were agreeing to something invisible. Emily didn't say much. She just kept staring at me with this soft look, like she was waiting for me to say a magic word. Every time I turned toward her, she smiled too quickly, like she was trying to reassure me but didn't really know how. I noticed the kids weren't eating or talking. They were drawing on napkins with crayons, but not normal pictures, just the same shape repeated over and over again. A circle with lines coming out of it, kind of like a sun. The older man at the end of the table leaned forward and said they were happy I'd come. His voice was slow, deep, and had this tone like he'd said the same thing many times before. Emily's mom poured me a drink from a glass pitcher. It looked like water, but smelled sweet, almost chemical. I didn't touch it. At one point, the lights flickered, and every single person at the table lifted their glass at the same time, holding it midair for several seconds. When the lights came back on, they put them down in perfect sync. I stood up and said I really had to go, that the movie was starting soon. No one moved. Emily looked up at me like I'd just said something confusing. Then she said softly that I couldn't leave yet. Her dad stood up again, this time slower, and smiled. The others began humming something low, the same tune they'd sung before, but quieter. I stepped back, knocking into one of the chairs, and muttered something about needing air. No one followed me to the door, but when I turned the handle, it didn't move. Emily's mom told me to sit back down. Her voice didn't sound calm anymore. That's when I noticed something strange about the walls. Every photo frame in the room showed the same exact picture. Emily sitting at that table, surrounded by the same people, smiling the same smile. Except in the older ones, the person beside her wasn't me. It was someone else, a different guide each time. I didn't think. I just pulled harder on the door until it opened. I stepped outside into the cold air, heart racing, and ran down the driveway toward my car. My hands were shaking too much to get the keys in right. When I finally got inside, I looked up and saw them all standing in the doorway, perfectly lined up, still smiling. Emily was in front, holding the same slice of cake. I drove off fast and didn't look back until I reached the main road. When I got home, I checked my phone. I had 3 missed calls, all from an unknown number. No voicemails. Then I got a text. It was a picture, a blurry one, but I could tell what it was. The dinner table, the same one from her house, but now there was a new photo frame sitting on the wall behind it. And in it, I was sitting next to her, smiling. It started off like the easiest kind of date. No pressure, no fancy restaurant, just coffee and a slice of cake at this little cafe tucked into a quiet corner of town. The kind of place where the lights were soft and the background chatter made everything feel easy. His name was Ryan. I'd met him a week earlier through a friend who swore he was normal, which already sounded like a rare compliment. He showed up right on time, smiling, and I remember thinking how comfortable he looked. Not overdressed, not trying too hard. The conversation flowed easily, not forced, not awkward. We talked about random stuff, like bad school memories and weird food combinations. He laughed easily, the kind of laugh that fills a room without being loud. It was one of those nights where I actually started to relax, thinking maybe this wouldn't be another awkward, let's never text again situation. He made me forget about my phone, forget about checking the time. Then the bell over the cafe door rang. I didn't look up at first, but Ryan did. He went still mid-sentence, just for a second. When I finally turned, I noticed a man walking in. Tall, dark hair, gray jacket. The exact same jacket Ryan was wearing. The same face too. Same eyes. Same haircut. Same faint scar near the chin. My brain didn't process it right away. It was like my eyes saw it, but my brain refused to make sense of it. I thought maybe it was a weird coincidence. Maybe someone who just looked similar. But then he looked right at me. Not at Ryan. Straight at me. Ryan noticed I was staring and turned to glance at the guy, but didn't react. Didn't say anything. Didn't move. It was like he didn't even see him. The new guy walked up to the counter, ordered something, and sat down by the window. I kept watching him while pretending to stir my drink, waiting for some kind of sign that this wasn't what it looked like. But the more I watched, the less sense it made. Every small movement, every tilt of his head, it was the same, perfectly mirrored. When Ryan leaned forward to tell another story, the guy at the window leaned forward too, almost at the same time. I thought maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I was nervous and my brain was filling in details that weren't there. I excused myself to the bathroom just to breathe. Inside, I checked my reflection in the mirror and tried to make myself laugh about it. I even texted my friend saying the guy looked like Ryan's twin, but when I walked back out, everything felt wrong. The sound in the cafe had changed. Quieter, like someone had turned down the volume on the world. Ryan was sitting exactly where I'd left him, except now the other man was gone. Ryan looked up and smiled at me like nothing had happened. Like there hadn't just been a second version of him sitting 20 feet away. I sat down slowly, trying not to look too freaked out. The coffee in front of him wasn't the same, though. The cup was smaller, a different style, like it had just been replaced. He started talking again, same voice, same stories. But something about him felt off. His tone had changed slightly, calmer, slower, almost rehearsed. I asked if everything was okay, but he just nodded, smiling in that too-perfect way. When the waitress came by, she looked between us and hesitated for a second before asking if we needed anything else. Her eyes lingered on him longer than normal, like she was trying to figure something out. He looked back at her with a blank expression that made her step away quickly. I told him I should probably get going soon, that I had work in the morning. He said that was fine, but his eyes didn't match his voice. He looked at me like he was waiting for something, like he was testing whether I'd notice. Then the door opened again. The bell rang. I looked up, and the man who had been sitting at the window earlier walked in again. This time there was no confusion. It was the same guy. Same everything. The only difference was the expression. The new one looked more normal, relaxed even. The one sitting across from me didn't move at all. For a moment, both of them just looked at each other. Not shocked, not angry, just quietly watching, like they were studying each other. The people around us didn't seem to notice, or maybe they were pretending not to. I couldn't move. My hands were gripping the edge of the table, my heart racing so fast I thought I might pass out. Then, without a word, the version of him sitting across from me stood up. He smiled faintly at me, the same exact smile as before, and walked toward the exit. He didn't look back. The second one, the one who had just walked in, slid right into his seat, smoothly like it was planned. He picked up the cup in front of him and started drinking from it, my cup. I wanted to ask what was happening, but no sound came out. My throat felt dry. I looked toward the counter to see if the waitress had noticed, but she wasn't there anymore. The place felt emptier. The new Ryan, or maybe the real one, I didn't know, looked at me and continued the conversation exactly where it had left off. Same words, same rhythm, like he had been in the whole time. I sat there, barely breathing, pretending to listen. My phone buzzed in my bag, but I didn't check it. I just wanted to leave. When I finally stood up, he asked if I was leaving already. His tone was polite, but his smile didn't fade. I said I had to go, and he nodded, telling me he'd text me later. I walked out fast, not looking back. When I got outside, I noticed the reflection in the window. The cafe lights made it hard to see clearly, but I could make out the shape of someone sitting in my seat. Not him. Me. Sitting there, still talking to him. I ran to my car. By the time I got home, I had a text from an unknown number. It was a picture of the cafe. From inside, I was sitting at the table smiling with him across from me. But in the reflection of the window, there were two of him, one facing me, one standing behind me. I deleted his number and blocked it, but the next morning I got another text. Just a message this time. No picture. Next time, don't leave early. I haven't gone back to that cafe since, But sometimes when I walk by, I swear I see my reflection inside, sitting alone like I never left at all. It wasn't supposed to be anything serious, just drinks. That's how it always starts. Casual, harmless, no pressure. His name was Callum, and we'd met through mutual friends at a party a week before. He had that calm kind of confidence that makes you feel like he's done this 100 times before. Smooth talker, nice enough, funny in the quiet way. When he texted to ask if I wanted to grab a drink, I said sure. We met at this dimly lit bar downtown, the kind with sticky tables and old photos of random people on the walls. He was already sitting there when I arrived, sipping on something clear. He smiled when he saw me stood up and pulled out the chair like people do in movies. It made me laugh a little because no one actually does that anymore. The night was easy. We talked about boring stuff. Movies, food, work. I didn't feel nervous, just kind of comfortable in that warm, tipsy way. He didn't ask weird questions or overshare. He was polite, attentive, the kind of guy who always listens just long enough before changing the topic. After 2 drinks, he offered to walk me out. The street outside was cold and almost empty, the air smelling faintly of rain. We stood there for a bit, awkwardly saying those "this was fun" lines that don't really mean anything. Then he asked if I wanted to come up for a bit, just to hang out. Normally I would have said no, but something about him seemed trustworthy. Maybe it was the calm voice. Maybe it was the fact that he didn't seem like he was pushing for anything. So I said okay. His apartment was only a few blocks away. A tall, newer building with white walls and long hallways that smelled faintly like cleaning chemicals. When we got to his floor, everything was silent. No voices, no sound from other apartments, just the dull hum of the lights. He unlocked the door and I followed him in. The first thing I noticed was how clean it was. Not tidy clean, sterile clean. Every surface spotless, no dust, no clutter, no random mess like you'd expect from someone living alone. The living room looked like it had been staged for a photo shoot. A couch, a coffee table, a single framed picture on the wall of an empty field. There were no personal touches, no photos, no shoes by the door, no books, not even a remote on the couch. I made a joke about how clean it was, but he just smiled and said he liked things simple. He offered me water and I sat on the couch. The cushions didn't sink in at all when I sat down. They were stiff, like they'd never been used. The air smelled faintly like lemon, the kind of smell you get from cleaning products. He disappeared into the kitchen for a bit and I looked around. The fridge had nothing on it. No magnets, no notes, nothing. There wasn't even a sound from it running. When he came back, he handed me a glass of water and sat down next to me. I pretended to sip it. He started talking again, but I wasn't really listening. I was too focused on how empty the apartment felt. After a few minutes, I excused myself to the bathroom. I told him I'd be right back, and he nodded, still smiling. The bathroom was just as spotless as everything else. White tiles, white sink, white walls. No toothbrush on the counter, no soap, no towel. Just a mirror above the sink and a cabinet below. I opened the cabinet out of habit. Inside were 10 identical toothbrushes, still in their plastic packaging, all lined up perfectly. Same brand, same color. I stared at them for a while, trying to make sense of it. Maybe he bought them in bulk. Maybe he had guessed a lot. But something about the way they were arranged, perfectly straight, evenly spaced, didn't feel normal. I closed the cabinet slowly and looked around again. There was no toilet paper holder, just a roll sitting neatly on the edge of the sink, untouched. The mirror was spotless, not even a single water spot. When I stepped back into the hallway, I noticed another door slightly open near the end of the corridor. Curiosity got the better of me, and I took a few quiet steps toward it. Inside was a bedroom, or what was supposed to be one. There was a bed, neatly made, but again, nothing else. No lamp, no nightstand, no clothes anywhere. Just white sheets pulled tight enough to look military-level perfect. On the dresser was a small box, black with no label. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. Inside were more toothbrushes, still in packages, a few razors, and something else, a stack of small laminated cards. I picked one up. It was a driver's license. Not his. A woman's. Different names, different faces. All women. Each photo clipped cleanly from the corner, leaving a small piece missing. Before I could even process it, I heard movement behind me. He was standing in the doorway smiling, not angry, not shocked, just standing there, hands in his pockets, watching me like he'd been waiting. He said nothing. The silence stretched out so long that my heart felt like it might burst out of my chest. He walked over slowly and picked up the box, placed it back down gently. Then he stepped aside and gestured toward the door like he was letting me leave. I didn't argue. I walked past him without saying a word, grabbed my jacket from the couch, and left the apartment. The hallway outside felt colder than before. I walked quickly, trying not to run, trying not to look back. When the elevator doors closed, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. By the time I reached the lobby, my phone buzzed. It was a text from him. "Don't worry. I'll use yours next time." I didn't reply. I blocked the number, deleted the messages, everything. A week later, I told one of my friends about it. She told me she thought she'd matched with the same guy before. Same name, same face. When she showed me the picture, it looked like him. But the name on the profile wasn't Callum. It was one of the names from the cards in the box. Sometimes I think about that cabinet of toothbrushes, about how there were 10, about how, if I hadn't left when I did, there would have been 9 left. I didn't notice she'd left it behind until I was halfway home. The night had gone fine, a little awkward at first, but that's normal for a first date. Her name was Mia. We met on an app, talked for about a week, then decided to grab dinner. She picked the place, a small restaurant near the river that had string lights and outdoor seating. She was easy to talk to. Funny, relaxed, the kind of person who keeps eye contact just a second too long. There was something intense about the way she watched me, but I brushed it off as nerves. We left a lot, shared dessert, then walked a bit afterward. She said she'd text me when she got home, and I believed her. When I got in my car, I noticed something on the passenger seat. Her phone. I recognized it immediately. Pink case, small crack near the corner, glittery background. I figured she'd realize soon enough and call or text me from another phone. I almost turned back to return it, but decided to wait until morning. It was late, and we both lived on opposite sides of town. At the next red light, the screen lit up. Her wallpaper wasn't what I remembered seeing earlier. When she'd show me a meme during dinner, her lock screen was a picture of a dog. Now it was a grid of tiny thumbnail images, hundreds of them. I couldn't see clearly, but one of the pictures looked familiar. It looked like me. I parked outside my building, turned off the car, and stared at the screen again. The phone buzzed with a low battery warning, lighting up the thumbnails again. My heart started pounding. I tilted the screen closer. Every single image was of me. Sitting at the table, laughing, talking, looking away, bending over to grab my jacket, standing by my car. Hundreds of photos, all taken tonight. Different angles, some blurry, some perfectly framed. Some looked like they'd been taken from across the street, others from close up, like she'd stood right beside me. There was one of me leaning on the table, looking down at the menu, and another one of that same moment from behind, like from a totally different spot. I tried to convince myself it was just some glitch, some creepy prank app. But then I remembered, she'd barely been on her phone the whole night. She didn't take any selfies, didn't ask for a photo together. She hadn't pointed her camera at me even once. I unlocked my own phone and scrolled through our texts. Everything looked normal, short, casual, nothing strange. But then I noticed the first message she'd ever sent me. It was from a number that didn't match the one saved under her contact. I hadn't noticed before. The conversation had started from that number, but all the recent messages came from a new one. It was like she'd switched phones halfway through talking to me. The thought made me uneasy. I decided to leave her phone on my kitchen counter and go to bed. But curiosity got the better of me. When I picked it up again, it lit up with another notification. A message, but not from anyone I knew. Just a text that said, "Did you see them yet?" No contact name. No profile picture. Just that line. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Then stupidly, I swiped up to try and see if more messages were there. The phone unlocked immediately. No passcode. No Face ID. It just opened. Her gallery was the first thing I checked. There were thousands of photos. All of me. Not just from tonight. From days before. Me at the grocery store, me walking my dog, me parking my car. Some from angles that didn't even make sense, through my apartment window, through my blinds. My hands started shaking. I scrolled faster, images blurring together. The more I went back, the more it looked like she'd been following me for weeks. There were photos of me from places I didn't even remember being that day. I could see timestamps, some from before we ever matched on the app. That's when I realized one of the photos wasn't old. It was live. A small red dot blinked in the corner of the thumbnail. It was a video, streaming from the phone's camera. When I opened it, my own face filled the screen. Not through the front camera, through the rear one. She was watching me. I froze. I turned the phone over, expecting to see something, but it looked normal. Still, the red light kept blinking. The view moved slightly, like the phone was being held by invisible hands. The angle was changing, rotating, closing in on my face. I dropped it. The sound of it hitting the counter snapped me out of whatever haze I was in. I ran to the door, checked the hallway through the peephole. Nothing. Silence. When I looked back, the phone was still on the counter, screen down. I didn't want to touch it again. I grabbed a dish towel, picked it up carefully, and shoved it into a drawer. Then I turned off all the lights and went to my bedroom, locking the door behind me. I couldn't sleep. Every noise from outside felt like footsteps. Every car passing by sounded like someone parking right outside my window. Around 3 a.m. I heard my phone buzz again. I thought it was mine, but it wasn't. The sound was coming from the kitchen. I stayed frozen for what felt like an hour before finally creeping out to check. The drawer I'd put her phone in was slightly open. The light from inside glowed faintly, like the screen was on again. When I pulled it open, the camera app was open, facing me. The red dot blinked again. A new notification popped up on the screen, from that same number as before. Perfect angle. That's when I threw it across the room. It hit the floor and went black. The next morning, I took it to the police. I explained everything. The photos, the messages, the live stream. They took it seriously at first, but after a few minutes of checking, one of the officers told me the phone had been completely wiped. Empty. No photos, no messages, no videos. Like it had been factory reset overnight. They kept it for evidence and told me they'd contact me if anything came up. That was 3 months ago. I haven't heard back. Every now and then, I still get texts from unknown numbers. No words, just photos. Always of me from somewhere nearby. Sometimes at work, sometimes walking home, sometimes in my apartment like they were taken from just outside my window. And last week, I got one more. It was a picture of me sleeping. The caption underneath said, "You looked better in person." I still don't know why I said yes when he offered to drive me home. I could have easily taken a rideshare or walked. It wasn't even that late, just past 10, but when he said it, I didn't think twice. His name was Adam. We met through a mutual friend at a party a week before. He was quiet, polite, and kind of awkward in a way that made him seem harmless. We met up for dinner at this diner on the edge of town, the kind that still plays old music through dusty speakers. He told me he liked places that weren't crowded, said it made it easier to actually talk. I didn't think that was weird. The conversation started slow, but it picked up eventually. He asked about my family, my job, my favorite movies. Normal questions. When the night started winding down, I told him I should probably head home. He smiled, paid the bill before I could even reach for my wallet, and said he'd drive me. I hesitated for a second, not because I didn't trust him, but because I didn't really know him. But then I thought about how weird it would be to say no, so I just agreed. We walked out together, and I remember how cold the air felt. His car was parked at the far end of the lot. A plain silver sedan, spotless inside. No smell, no clutter, not even a water bottle. He unlocked the doors, and I got in. That's when I noticed how quiet it was. No music, no sound from his phone. Just a hum of the engine and the faint clicking of the turn signal when we pulled out. For the first few minutes, it felt fine. We chatted a bit, small stuff like what time we both had work the next day. But the conversation died fast. Then he stopped talking altogether. He didn't even look at me. His face was blank, eyes fixed on the road like he was concentrating on something only he could see. I thought maybe he was just tired, but then I realized he'd missed my turn. I pointed it out casually, expecting him to apologize and loop back. He didn't. He didn't even glance at me. He just kept driving straight. I left nervously, trying to make it sound like no big deal, and mentioned it again. Still nothing. The silence in the car was heavy now, not just quiet, but intentional. The kind that feels like it's swallowing every sound around it. The only light came from passing street lamps flashing through the windows in quick bursts. I glanced at his phone sitting in the cup holder. It was turned off. Not locked. Off. The screen was black, not even charging. Something about that made my stomach twist. I tried to stay calm, tried to tell myself maybe he was taking a shortcut or just lost in thought. But the longer we drove, the darker it got outside. Houses turned into open fields, streetlights disappeared, and the road stretched out endlessly ahead. I checked the time, 10:43. We should have been near my neighborhood by then. Instead, we were somewhere I didn't recognize. I opened my mouth to say something, but my throat felt dry. He wasn't even blinking much, just staring straight ahead, hands steady on the wheel. After a while, I noticed the GPS screen. It wasn't showing a route, just a blank map with the words, "No signal," flashing in the corner. That's when the panic started to creep in. I pretended to adjust my jacket, slipping my phone into my lap. I turned it on, but there was barely a signal. A single bar flickered and vanished. Outside, the road narrowed. The pavement turned into rough gravel. Trees lined both sides, blocking out most of the sky. His headlights cut through the dark, catching glimpses of twisted branches and empty signs. I asked where we were going, quietly at first, then louder. Still nothing. He didn't move, didn't react. His face looked completely calm. I started to think maybe something was wrong with him. Maybe he'd zoned out or was having some kind of breakdown. I reached out to touch his arm, just to get his attention. The second my hand brushed his sleeve, he tightened his grip on the wheel. His knuckles went pale. The car sped up. The engine roared louder than it should have. My heart was pounding so fast, it felt like I couldn't breathe. I told him to stop, my voice shaky now. Nothing. The trees on both sides blurred together. I looked at the dashboard. The gas tank was nearly full. He had no reason to stop. I thought about jumping out. The door handle was right there, inches away, but we were moving too fast, and the road was uneven. One wrong move, and I'd hit the gravel face first. I started scanning the sides of the road for lights, any sign of life, but it was just blackness stretching forever. After a while, I saw something ahead, a faint glow in the distance. Maybe a house, maybe another car. It was enough to give me hope. I told myself if he slowed down even slightly, I'd grab the handle and run. But as we got closer, I realized it wasn't a house. It was an old gas station. The sign was half broken, flickering weakly. The place looked abandoned, but there was one car parked out front, dark blue, engine off. For the first time all night, he slowed down. My chance. The moment we stopped, I didn't think. I yanked the handle and jumped out. My legs hit the gravel hard, but I caught myself and ran straight toward the gas station. I didn't look back. The air was freezing. Every sound echoed. My footsteps, my breathing, the crunch of gravel. When I reached the door, it wouldn't open. The lights inside were dim, but I could see shelves and a counter. Empty. I turned back. His car was still there, headlights on, engine idling. He hadn't moved. He was just sitting there watching. After what felt like forever, he slowly rolled the window down. He smiled. Not wide, not forced, just a calm, quiet smile. Then he turned off the headlights. I backed away into the dark, clutching my phone. Somehow this time the signal came through, one bar. I dialed for help, not even sure what to say. I just kept whispering where I was and hoping someone would trace it. When I looked up again, the car was gone. No sound, no lights, just empty road. By the time the police arrived, there was nothing left to find. No car tracks, no proof he'd even been there. They asked if I remembered the plate number. I didn't. All I could remember was that calm smile and how steady his hands looked on the wheel. Sometimes late at night, I still check my street through the blinds. Every few weeks, I see a silver sedan parked just far enough away that I can't make out the plate. And every time the headlights turn off the moment I notice. It started as a joke. At least, that's what I thought it was. Her name was Tessa. We'd been talking online for about 2 weeks before meeting in person. She was fun to message with. Witty, unpredictable, a little strange, but in that entertaining way that keeps you hooked. We decided to meet at this quiet restaurant she said she loved, one I'd never heard of before. It was tucked behind a strip of closed shops, the kind of place that didn't look like much from the outside, but smelled incredible when we walked in. She was already there when I arrived. She waved from the corner booth, smiling like she already knew me. There was something about her that didn't quite match her pictures, not in a bad way, just sharper somehow. Her eyes seemed brighter, more alive. I sat down, and she leaned forward immediately, like she'd been waiting for this moment all day. The waiter came over with menus, but she didn't even look at hers. She told me she'd order for both of us. I laughed, thinking she was joking, but she stayed serious. I didn't argue. Maybe it was part of her confident thing, like she liked to be in control. She said she wanted to play a game. I thought she meant something like 20 questions or truth or dare, something stupid to break the ice. She didn't explain what the game was, though. She just smiled and said I'd find out soon. I shrugged it off. The conversation was normal enough after that. She asked me random questions, but not normal ones. Things like what my biggest fear was, how I'd react if I knew someone was lying to me, whether I'd ever eaten something I didn't recognize just to see what would happen. She asked them like she was taking notes in her head. When the food arrived, it was strange. Not the dishes I expected. 2 identical plates of something that looked like chicken pasta, except the sauce was a deep red, almost too red. It smelled good though, spicy, tangy. She waited while the waiter set the food down, still smiling. I picked up my fork, and she rested her chin on her hand, just watching. I asked if she wasn't going to eat. She said she would, after me. I laughed, trying to make it light, but she didn't. She stayed completely still, eyes locked on mine, like she was studying me. I told her I didn't like being watched while eating, but she said it was part of the game. I was halfway through the plate when I realized she hadn't touched hers. Her fork was still perfectly clean, resting across the napkin. I joked that maybe she didn't like the food. She didn't answer, just tilted her head a bit, the corners of her mouth twitching like she was holding back a laugh. The food was good though, really good. I finished most of it without thinking. At the moment I set my fork down, something about her expression changed. Her smile didn't look playful anymore. It was wide, forced, almost excited. She asked how I was feeling. At first I thought she meant if I liked the food, but the way she asked, slow, deliberate, made my stomach drop a little. I said I felt fine, but as I said it, something in me hesitated. A strange warmth started spreading in my chest, not in a pleasant way. My skin felt prickly, like it was too tight. My throat itched. I grabbed my water and took a big gulp, but it didn't help. She just watched, still smiling. The warmth turned heavy. My heartbeat sounded loud, too loud. The edges of the room felt fuzzy, like everything was closing in. My mouth was dry even though I'd just had water. I asked her what was in the food, my voice coming out cracked. She didn't answer. Instead, she picked up her fork and started eating her plate calmly, one bite at a time, her eyes never leaving mine. I stood up, or tried to. My legs felt weak. The air in the room seemed thicker, like breathing through fabric. I remember gripping the edge of the table just to stay upright. The waiter glanced over, but didn't move. Nobody did. It was like the whole place had gone still. Tessa finished her food, wiped her mouth neatly with a napkin, and asked again if I was feeling okay. The floor tilted under me. My stomach twisted so hard I thought I was going to throw up. I stumbled toward the door, but the distance felt wrong, like the room stretched longer than before. The lights above seemed dimmer, flickering faintly. She didn't follow me. She just sat there, watching as I pushed through the door and into the cold air outside. The street was empty. My vision pulsed in and out, each breath coming shorter than the last. I leaned against a wall and pulled out my phone, trying to call someone, anyone. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. The first thing I saw when the screen lit up was a new notification, a message from her. It said, "You lasted longer than most." My stomach dropped. I started running. I don't even know where to. I just needed to get away from that place. My legs were heavy, like I was wading through water. I turned the corner, and everything blurred. The buildings melted into black shapes. My body felt detached, like it wasn't mine. Somehow, I made it home. I don't even remember unlocking the door. I collapsed on the couch, drenched in sweat, heart pounding out of control. I grabbed a bottle of water and downed it, trying to stay conscious. After maybe an hour, the feeling started to fade. The warmth turned into chills, the dizziness into exhaustion. I sat there shaking, replaying the whole thing in my head. What kind of game was that? When I finally calmed down enough to think, I opened my phone again. Her number was gone. Not blocked, not deleted, gone. Our entire chat history had vanished. Her name, her messages, her contact. Nothing. I checked the restaurant's address online to figure out what had happened, maybe to call and ask about her. But the search came up empty. No listings, no photos, no reviews. Just a message saying the location didn't exist. I drove back the next day just to prove to myself I wasn't losing it. The spot where the restaurant should have been was there, same strip of shops, but the building was boarded up. Windows covered, no sign, no trace that it had ever been open. Sometimes I still think about that night, the red sauce, the way she smiled right before I started feeling sick. A few weeks later, I saw her again. Different hair, different clothes, but the same face. Sitting in the cafe across the street from my work, laughing with someone else. 2 identical plates in front of them. And when I looked again a minute later, she was gone. Both of them were. It wasn't supposed to be anything intense, just a drink after work. I'd met him a week earlier at a mutual friend's housewarming. His name was Matt. He seemed normal. A bit too smooth maybe, but not creepy. He made jokes that were just the right amount of confident, remembered little details I'd said, and never made things awkward. When he asked if I wanted to grab a drink later that week, it felt casual enough to say yes. We met at this small bar near downtown. I'd been there before. Dim lighting, fake candles on the tables, quiet enough that you didn't have to shop to talk. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 drinks in front of him. He smiled when he saw me and said he'd ordered his favorite cocktail, just in case I wanted to try it. The night started fine. We talked about random stuff, work, mutual friends, bad dating app stories. He was charming, not pushy, the kind of guy who laughs at your jokes even when they aren't funny. Every time I finished a sip of my drink, he'd ask if I wanted to try his. He said it was strong but worth it. I left it off the first couple of times, but eventually he pushed the glass toward me, saying I had to at least take 1 sip. I didn't want to be weird about it, so I did. It tasted different. Bitter at first, then weirdly sweet after a second. Not bad, just strange. He smiled when I put it down, like that was the whole point. After that, things started feeling fuzzy. Not right away, it was slow, almost sneaky. My head felt lighter, like I'd had way more to drink than I actually had. My body felt warm, but not in the normal buzzed way. It was like the air around me had thickened. He kept talking, but I stopped processing the words. I remember staring at his mouth moving, but I couldn't connect the sounds. The lights around the room started blending together, stretching like reflections on water. At some point, he asked if I was okay. I think I nodded. He said something about walking me home, and I remember mumbling something about calling a ride instead. Then everything went blank. When I opened my eyes again, I was in my own bed. My head was pounding, and my mouth was dry. It felt like I'd slept for days. Sunlight was spilling through the blinds, too bright, too harsh. For a second, I didn't know where I was. Then I heard my roommate's voice. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, looking at me like she wasn't sure what to say. She told me Matt had brought me home last night. Said I'd gotten too drunk, and he wanted to make sure I got back safe. Apparently, he carried me inside, laid me down, kissed my forehead, and left. I didn't remember leaving the bar. I didn't remember the ride home, unlocking the door, or anything after that last drink. I sat up, and the room spun hard enough that I had to grab the edge of the bed to steady myself. My roommate asked if I was okay, but I couldn't answer. My throat burned. My chest felt heavy. I asked her what time it was, and she said it was almost noon, meaning I'd been out for more than 12 hours. She told me something else too. She said he'd been calm, polite, and told her I was just a lightweight. He stayed for a few minutes to make sure I was breathing okay. Then he smiled and told her I was lucky to have a good friend before leaving. The way she said it made my skin crawl. I got up and went straight to the bathroom. My makeup was smeared, my hair tangled, but what freaked me out most were the faint marks around my wrist, like I'd been held too tightly. Not bruises, just redness that looked out of place. I checked my phone next. There were texts from him, Short ones. You okay? Sleep well. You look peaceful. I didn't respond. The longer I sat there, the more things started to click in my head. I hadn't been drunk. I'd barely had one drink before trying his, and whatever I drank from his glass didn't taste like anything I'd had before. My roommate said when he brought me home I could barely stand. He told her I'd fallen asleep in the car and that I'd said not to call anyone. But I never said that. I called the bar later that day, asking if anyone had seen me leave. The bartender said she remembered me. She said I looked fine, maybe a little tired, but not drunk. She also said she saw us talking with another guy sitting at the bar, someone who left right after we did. When I asked if she remembered what the guy looked like, she hesitated before saying she thought he was taking photos. That part made me feel sick. I went through my phone again, scrolling through my camera roll, and found something I didn't take, a blurry photo of me at the bar, sitting with my head turned mid-laugh, taken from behind me. The timestamp was around the time I stopped remembering anything. I showed my roommate, but she didn't recognize the background behind the photo. It wasn't the bar. It looked like a parking lot somewhere. That night, I didn't sleep. Every sound in the apartment made my heart race. I kept thinking about how calm he'd been when he dropped me off. How he told my roommate I looked peaceful, like he'd done it before. The next morning, I called the number he gave me when we first met. It was disconnected. The messages I'd sent before that, gone. Just empty gray boxes. His contact picture was gone too. I checked his social media. Every account was deleted. The friend who'd introduced us swore she didn't even know him that well, said he was someone she met through another party months ago. She said she couldn't remember his last name. Weeks went by. I started sleeping with the lights on. I told myself it was just anxiety, that nothing really happened, that maybe I'd gotten too drunk without realizing it. But then one morning I found something on my doorstep. A small envelope. No note, no name. Inside was a Polaroid photo. It was me, lying in bed, the same night he carried me home. The photo was taken from inside my room. And written at the bottom in black ink were 3 words. You looked peaceful. It was one of those nights that started out almost too normal. Nothing felt strange. Nothing hinted at how weird it would end. I met her on a dating app. Her name was Lara. Her profile looked simple. No heavy filters, no weird angles. Just a few photos of her hiking, laughing, holding a coffee cup. She messaged first, said she liked my dog, and from there we talked every day for a week. She suggested dinner. I picked the place, a cozy Italian restaurant downtown that always smelled like fresh bread. We met outside around 7. She looked exactly like her photos, which was a relief. Brown jacket, small gold necklace, bright smile. She had this calm way of talking that made the first few minutes feel less awkward than they usually are. We got a table near the window. She sat with her back to the street. I sat facing it. The waiter handed us menus and she didn't even glance at hers. Said she trusted me to pick something good. That made me laugh. It felt easy. The food came fast and we started talking about random things. Old pets, childhood memories, teachers, stuff like that. She laughed at almost everything I said, but it never felt fake. She kept eye contact, never checked her phone, and I remember thinking how rare that was. About halfway through dinner, I excused myself to use the bathroom. I left my phone, jacket, and keys on the chair beside me, figuring it was fine. The restaurant wasn't big, and she was right there. When I came back, the table was empty. At first, I thought she'd gone to the bathroom too. Her coat was gone, though, and so was my stuff. My phone, my jacket, my keys, even the small bottle of cologne I'd tossed in my pocket earlier. Everything. The half-eaten plates were still there. My drink had condensation running down inside, but she was gone. I stood there for a second, not wanting to make a scene. Then I asked the waiter if he'd seen where she went. He looked at me like he already knew what I was going to ask. He said she'd left a few minutes ago, and that she asked him to bring me the check. I laughed at first, thinking he was joking, but then he handed me the small black folder. Inside was the bill for both of our meals plus drinks. That's when it hit me that this wasn't some kind of misunderstanding. My hands were shaking a little when I checked my pockets again, just to make sure I hadn't been dumb enough to misplace everything. But no, my jacket was gone. My phone was gone. My keys gone. The waiter apologized quietly, said there wasn't much he could do. I tried to explain that my wallet was in my jacket, that I couldn't even pay the bill, but he just nodded with his tired look, like he'd heard it all before. I ended up giving him my watch. Not expensive, but enough to cover it. He hesitated before taking it, but I told him I'd come back tomorrow to sort it out. He just nodded again. When I walked outside, the air felt colder than before. My car was parked across the street, locked, useless without my keys. I stood there trying to figure out what to do next. I didn't have my phone to call anyone, and it was too late to catch the bus. I walked for nearly an hour. The streets got quieter the further I went. I tried to make sense of it the whole way. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe she misunderstood something. Maybe she'd come back. But deep down I knew. No one accidentally steals someone's keys, phone, and jacket all at once. When I finally got home, I had to bang on the door until my roommate let me in. He thought it was hilarious. Said maybe I just picked the wrong girl. I didn't laugh. The next morning, I borrowed his phone and tried calling mine. It rang once before going to voicemail. Then I called again. Same thing. By noon, the number stopped working entirely. Later that day, I went to the restaurant to ask if they had security cameras. The manager said they did, but that they only kept footage for 24 hours unless something serious happened. I asked if they could check anyway. He pulled it up on the small monitor behind the counter. I watched the moment I left for the bathroom, getting up, her sitting there, swirling her drink slowly. Then she reached across the table and grabbed my phone. No hesitation, no looking around. She slipped it into her purse, then reached for my jacket. She stood, checked her reflection in the window, and walked out. Calm, confident, like it was routine. The footage cut off there. The manager asked if I wanted to file a report, but I just said no. I didn't even know her last name. The number she'd given me was connected to a temporary SIM card. Her dating profile, gone, deleted. That night, I kept replaying everything in my head, every detail, every weird thing she'd said. She told me she didn't have social media because she liked privacy. She said she hated taking photos. She even mentioned she didn't have family nearby. She'd said all of it casually, like small talk, but now it sounded rehearsed. I didn't sleep much that week. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her smile across the table, the way she stirred her drink while watching me. Then 3 nights later, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. No subject line, no message, just an attachment. It was a photo. A picture of me sitting at that restaurant table, the exact night we met, taken from the angle where she'd been sitting. My jacket and phone were visible on the chair beside me. My face was turned slightly toward the camera, smiling. Underneath the photo, there was a small caption written in the corner, almost hidden in the pixels. You looked better in person. I deleted it immediately, but when I checked my inbox an hour later, there was another message. No text, no photo, just a single link. It led to a marketplace site. And listed for sale was my phone, my jacket, and my keys, each with different descriptions. All from a seller named Lara. That's when I stopped trying to make sense of it. I changed my number, deleted the apps, and moved apartments within a month. But sometimes I still get random follow requests from new accounts. No pictures, no posts. Just a single bio that says, "Trust me, you'll like this place." By the third date, I thought I had him figured out. His name was Drew, and he was the kind of guy who always had his life together. The clean apartment, the calm voice, the weird ability to make every plan sound like it was your idea. The first 2 dates went fine. Dinner and drinks the first time, a movie and late night walk the second. He wasn't pushy, didn't overshare, didn't flirt too aggressively. It was almost refreshing. The third date was the first time he invited me to his place. He said he'd cook. I remember being impressed by how specific he was. Told me what wine he'd picked out, what meal he was making, even which playlist he was going to put on. It sounded like the kind of effort people don't usually bother with anymore. When I got there, his apartment was exactly what I expected. Clean, minimal, borderline perfect. The kind of place that looks like no one actually lives in it. Everything matched, everything was folded, even the throw pillows looked symmetrical. He greeted me with a smile, took my coat, and went to pour wine. I looked around while he was in the kitchen. There was something unsettling about how still a place felt. No TV on, no music yet, just the faint sound of a cork being pulled. That's when I noticed the first thing. 2 wine glasses on the counter, both half full. I assumed one was for me and one was for him, but something about the placement felt off. They weren't next to each other. They were opposite sides of the small island, like someone had already been sitting there. When he came back with the food, I didn't mention it. We sat down to eat, and it was fine. Normal conversation, decent food, wine that tasted a little too strong, but good enough to ignore. About halfway through dinner, I got up to use the bathroom. That's when I started noticing more little things. In the bathroom, there were 2 toothbrushes, one pink, one blue. Both new looking, both perfectly lined up in a white holder. I remember thinking maybe he just liked having an extra one for guests, but it still felt weirdly personal. There was also a hairbrush sitting by the sink, not his kind. It had long strands of brown hair tangled in it. My hair's black, his is short. I stared at it for a long time, trying to come up with some kind of explanation that made sense. Maybe an ex left it. Maybe a sister visited. But there were other things too. A half-used bottle of foundation. A folded towel that had a faint lipstick stain near the edge. When I walked back out, the air felt different. I couldn't tell if it was the wine or the silence, but I felt tense. I sat down again, trying to act normal. That's when I noticed the coat. It was hanging on the back of the chair across from me. Not the one I'd been sitting in. It was a woman's coat, beige fitted with a small tear in the pocket. I asked him about it casually, like I wasn't suspicious. He just smiled. The kind of smile people give when they know something you don't. He said I'd meet her eventually. I laughed at first, thinking it was a joke, but he didn't laugh. He just kept smiling and poured more wine. The rest of dinner dragged. I tried to brush it off, tell myself he meant a friend, a roommate, a neighbor or something. But the whole time, I couldn't stop looking at the little things around the apartment. The photo frame turned face down on the shelf, the second pillow on the couch that had an indentation, the faint smell of perfume that wasn't mine. When I finished my wine, he offered to refill it. I said no. My head was already spinning more than it should have been. I told him I had to get going soon, and he didn't argue. He just nodded and said he'd walk me out. As I stood up, I caught a glimpse of something by the hallway, a pair of women's shoes neatly lined up near the door. Not hidden, not thrown aside, placed carefully like they were waiting for someone. I tried to stay calm, told him dinner was great, that I'd text him when I got home. He smiled again the same way as before. When I got outside, the air hit me like a wall. My legs felt weak, and my chest was tight. I kept replaying that sentence in my head. You'll meet her eventually. I walked faster than usual, checking behind me every few steps. The street was quiet, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. When I got home, I locked the door immediately. My phone buzzed not long after, a message from him. It said he had a great time and that she couldn't wait to meet me next time. I didn't reply. I turned off my phone and tried to sleep, but it was useless. My brain wouldn't stop spinning, replaying every detail. The next morning, I decided I was overreacting. Maybe he really did have a roommate or something. I tried to convince myself to laugh about it, until I checked social media. His account was gone. Deleted. Not deactivated, gone. Our messages on the dating app had disappeared too. It was like he'd never existed there at all. That same afternoon, I got a knock at my door. When I opened it, there was no one there, just a small white box on the ground. Inside was a wine glass, the same kind from his apartment, and wrapped around the stem was a note. It said, "She says you drank from her glass." I dropped it immediately. The stem snapped when it hit the floor. I never saw him again after that, but sometimes late at night, my phone buzzes from an unknown number. No text, no name, just a single photo sent every time. Always of 2 toothbrushes. Always sitting side by side. It started off way too normal for how it ended. I met her through a friend of a friend, the kind of setup that's meant to feel casual. Her name was Alina. She messaged me first, said she'd seen my profile, thought I seemed grounded, whatever that means. She liked writing, reading, quiet nights in cafes, that sort of vibe. Nothing weird. Our first date was at this little book-themed coffee shop she picked out. It was the kind of place with creaky floors, walls covered in old novels, and candles on every table. She was already sitting when I got there, typing on her laptop. She looked exactly like her pictures, maybe even better in person, but something about her posture made me pause. She sat too straight, too still, like she was waiting for a cue. She smiled when she saw me, and it was easy after that. She talked a lot. About poetry, old films, the way people don't write letters anymore. I didn't mind it. She had this kind of hypnotic way of speaking, like she'd thought about every word before saying it. We ordered coffee, then pastries, and spent a couple hours talking. When the night started to die down, I offered to walk her to her car. She said she lived nearby and wanted to show me something before I left, her writing portfolio. I figured it was one of those creative things people do to break the ice. She seemed proud of her work, so I agreed. Her apartment was a few blocks away. The building was old but clean, one of those places with loud radiators and too many locks on the door. She led me inside, flicked on a dim lamp, and gestured for me to sit at her desk while she got her laptop. The place was strange. Not messy, but staged. Every shelf looked too neat, every book lined up by height, not title. A single framed photo sat on the dresser, an old black and white of a couple I didn't recognize. She came back holding her laptop like it was something precious. Said her portfolio was mostly short stories and poems, but she'd been experimenting with concept pieces. I didn't really know what that meant, but I nodded anyway. She pulled up a folder titled LIFEWORKS. Inside were dozens of files. Each one had a different name. Under glass, The Boy in the Snow, Still Breathing. She clicked the first one and started scrolling slowly. The story was eerie, something about a man who kept finding photographs of himself in other people's houses. Her writing was good, too good, honestly, but the tone felt cold, detached. She kept scrolling, showing me poems and essays, all dark, all personal in a way that made my stomach tighten. Some lines stuck out. He's almost ready, and some names write themselves twice. I told myself it was just her style. Then she opened a file near the bottom called Final Draft. It looked different from the others. No title page, no date. Just paragraphs of text centered on the screen. The first line made me stop breathing. It was my name. Not just my first name, my full name. Below it was my birthday. The format matched the way it appears on my ID. And beneath that, bolded were the words, "Beloved first date, gone too soon." For a second, I thought it was some kind of joke. Maybe she used my name as a placeholder. Maybe she thought it would be funny. But the longer I stared, the worse it got. It was an obituary. A full one. It described my sudden passing in disturbing detail. The time, the location, even fake statements from people I knew. It said things like he was found peaceful, though not where he expected to be. It listed my favorite foods, my hobbies, even my old dog's name. Things I hadn't told her. I remember my skin going cold, like my body realized before my brain did that something was seriously wrong. She didn't say anything while I read. She just sat there watching me. Her eyes didn't blink much, just followed my reaction. I scrolled down, hands shaking, until I reached the bottom of the page. There was one last line. To be published after our next date. That's when I looked out. She smiled. Not nervous, not embarrassed. Calm, proud even, like I just complimented her work. I stood up, trying to say something, but my voice caught halfway. I muttered that it was late, that I had to go, but she didn't move. She just kept smiling. When I reached for my jacket, I noticed something on the wall behind her desk, a corkboard filled with printouts. Headlines, names, photos. Some looked like articles, others looked handwritten, but the one at the center, pinned neatly with a small red string running through it, had my face on it. It was the same picture I use on my social media. I walked out fast. She didn't stop me, didn't follow, didn't say anything, just kept sitting there with that same calm expression. When I got outside, the air felt heavy. My hands were still shaking as I unlocked my car. I checked my phone. Dozens of messages from her, all from that night. Each one was a line from the obituary, word for word. I blocked her number immediately. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I even considered going to the police, but what'd I say? Some girl wrote a creepy story about me. It sounded stupid. I told myself she was just obsessed with her art. Maybe she'd done it for attention. Then 3 days later, I got an email. No subject line. No name. Just a file attached. Updated draft.pef. I didn't open it right away. My stomach told me not to, but curiosity won. Inside was the same obituary, same layout, same words, but this time the date of death had changed. It was that day's date. That was the last time I opened anything from her. I changed my number, deleted my accounts, stopped going to the cafe we met at. But last week, I got a letter in my mailbox. No return address, no stamp. Just one piece of paper inside. It was printed like a newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Local man dies in unexplained crash. Beloved first date." The photo beneath it wasn't from online. It was new. It was me sitting in my car, taken from across the street. His name was Tyler. We met through a friend at a small get-together a week before. He was the quiet type, polite, soft-spoken, a little awkward, but in that way that seems harmless. When he asked if I wanted to hang out again, I said sure. We met at a small diner near downtown. The weather was cool, the kind of early evening that feels made for walking. We ate, talked about nothing too deep. Family, work, what kind of music we liked. It felt fine. Comfortable. He paid without hesitation, which I thought was nice. Afterward, he suggested a walk. Said he wanted to show me his favorite street. I figured he meant one of those artsy areas where people hang fairy lights and play acoustic guitar on the sidewalk. I agreed because I wasn't ready to call it a night yet. He led me a few blocks away from the main strip. The air was cooler here, quieter too. The sounds of traffic and chatter faded as we walked further. The street we turned onto wasn't anything special at first glance. A long, narrow road lined with old brick buildings and flickering streetlights. The pavement was cracked in places, and the air smelled faintly like wet concrete. He said he loved the street because it was peaceful. Said no one ever came here anymore. At first, I didn't notice anything strange. We walked side by side, talking about small things. But after a few minutes, I realized how empty it was. Not just quiet, empty. No cars, no people, no open windows or signs of life. Just rows of buildings, each one darker than the last. Then I noticed the side streets. The first one we passed was blocked off by a metal fence covered in black tarp. I thought it was for construction. The next one had wooden boards nailed across the entrance, like someone had sealed it shut. A few blocks down, another was blocked by a chain-link gate padlocked tight. Every side street was closed off somehow. At first, I laughed it off. Joked that it was weirdly deserted like a movie set. He didn't laugh. He just kept walking, hands in his pockets, eyes straight ahead. The further we went, the less I liked it. The lights behind us started flickering out one by one until only the stretch ahead was lit. I told myself it was just old wiring, but something about the pattern, the way the darkness followed, made me walk faster. He slowed down, almost like he was enjoying it. I glanced around. Every window I could see was covered. Some had curtains drawn, others were nailed shut with wooden planks. One had a sign on it, but it was too faded to read. I asked how often he came here. He said often, almost every night. That was when I noticed something else. The buildings were just empty. They were abandoned. The paint was peeling, the bricks chipped. Some of the doors were boarded from the outside. Trash cans sat untouched. No lids, no smell. Just empty metal shells. There were no sounds except our footsteps. No dogs barking, no wind, no hum of distant traffic. Nothing. When I pointed it out, he smiled and said it was better this way. Said it made him feel calm. Less distractions. The words hit me wrong. I didn't even know what that meant. We walked another few minutes, and I started to realize I didn't know how long the street actually was. I couldn't see the end. No turns, no exits, no open side paths. Just a straight stretch of pavement that seemed to keep going forever. I pulled out my phone to check the map. No signal. Not even one bar. He noticed me checking and told me not to worry about it. Said the service was always bad here. When I looked up again, something felt different about his face. The smile was gone, replaced by something blank, too calm, too still, like he was waiting for me to say something specific. I decided to turn back. I said I was tired, that I wanted to head home. He didn't argue, didn't try to stop me, but he didn't move either. He just said that it was better if we kept going forward. The way he said it didn't sound like a suggestion. The air felt heavier now. I turned anyway and started walking back the way we came. The street behind us looked darker than before. I could barely see the diner lights in the distance. I walked faster, trying not to look behind me. After a minute, I glanced over my shoulder. He wasn't there. At least I thought he wasn't. Then I saw movement further down the road, just a shape at first, standing completely still in the middle of the street. He didn't move when I called his name, just stood there, facing me, too far away to see his face clearly. I picked up my pace, trying not to break into a full run. My chest was tight, my footsteps echoing too loudly. Every few seconds I looked back. Each time, he was a little closer. Not running, not walking fast, just steady, like he knew I wouldn't get far. When I reached the first side street, I tried the fence. It was locked tight. I yanked at the tarp, but it wouldn't tear. The boards on the next one were nailed so deep, I couldn't even get my fingers under them. Every exit was sealed. The sound of his footsteps started blending with mine. Slow, rhythmic. I ran. The street felt longer now, impossibly long. The lights were dying faster than I could reach them. Every few seconds, one would flicker out, plunging another stretch into darkness. I didn't stop until I saw something ahead, a bend in the road. Finally, an end. I sprinted toward it, lungs burning, legs shaking. When I reached the corner, I froze. It wasn't an exit. The street looped back. It was the same diner at the start, the same flickering sign, the same sidewalk where we first turned in, the same place I thought we'd left behind 20 minutes ago. I stumbled into the road, completely disoriented. That's when I saw him again, standing under the same streetlight where we'd started. Same posture, same smile. He tilted his head slightly, like he was waiting for me to notice something. Then I saw it. Every side street, every boarded-up path, every fence behind him had vanished. Just open space stretching into pitch black. I backed away slowly, but he didn't move toward me this time. He just said, in that calm tone again, that it was better this way. I didn't wait to hear anything else. I ran past him, out of the street, out of the darkness, until I reached the main road where cars and lights and noise existed again. When I turned back, the street was gone. Just a blank row of buildings and an alley that didn't lead anywhere. I never saw him again, but sometimes when I walk home at night, I catch glimpses of that same pattern, streets that look too long, exits that don't lead out. And sometimes far down the road, I see someone walking the same steady pace. I didn't get a bad feeling about him right away. He wasn't weird or pushy or anything like that, just a little too confident. His name was Ryan. We matched online, and after a few days of talking, we agreed to meet for dinner. I picked the place, somewhere busy and bright, because I've learned to never meet strangers in quiet spots. He showed up on time, dressed nice, smiling the whole time. Dinner was fine. He talked a lot about himself, but not in the worst way. It wasn't until after the food came that I started noticing little things. Like how he asked questions but never really listened to my answers, or how his eyes lingered too long when I laughed. Still, he wasn't rude, just a bit off. When the check came, he insisted on paying even though I offered to split. He made a joke about how it wasn't every day he met someone worth walking home. The way he said it didn't sound threatening exactly, but it made my stomach twist. I told him I was just going to order a rideshare instead. He didn't like that. He tried to talk me out of it, said it was late, so that he didn't want me in some random stranger's car, said he'd feel better walking me home. I kept my voice calm but firm. I said I had already ordered the car. He smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. He said fine, if that made me feel safer. The ride showed up a few minutes later. I said goodbye quickly and got in. The driver was quiet, maybe mid-40s, barely looked at me. The car smelled faintly like air freshener and coffee. I glanced at the app. His name was Mark. He didn't say much the entire ride except to confirm my address. When we got near my building, I noticed we weren't taking the usual route. He turned down a side street instead of going straight. I told him I lived the other way, and he nodded like he already knew. Then he circled the block and parked right in front of my apartment entrance, almost too perfectly. He smiled slightly in the rearview mirror, said something about how he knew shortcuts. I didn't respond. I just thanked him and got out fast. I watched the car's reflection in the glass door of my building until it pulled away. Inside, I locked everything, door, windows, even the chain. I turned on a few lights and tried to laugh it off. It wasn't that weird, I told myself. Just me overthinking again. I showered, changed into an oversized t-shirt, and scrolled on my phone for a while. Then I heard it. the sound of a car engine outside. Low and steady, I looked out through the blinds, half expecting it to be nothing. It was the same car. Same make, same color, same little air freshener hanging from the mirror, parked right across the street. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just coincidence. Maybe someone else in the building used the same rideshare company. But then I saw movement inside the car. 2 figures. The driver was there, Mark, and next to him, leaning comfortably in the passenger seat, was Ryan. They were talking, laughing, like 2 friends sharing a private joke. My stomach dropped. I stood frozen by the window, heart hammering so hard I could hear it. They weren't looking at me, but I knew they were there for me. I backed away slowly, not wanting to make any noise. My phone was on the couch, so I reached for it and opened the rideshare app. The ride from earlier had disappeared from my history. Completely gone. No trip details, no receipt, no record of Mark. That's when the fear really hit. I turned off all the lights in the apartment. The only glow came from my phone screen. I peeked out again. The car was still there. They hadn't moved. A few minutes passed, or maybe longer. It felt like forever. I couldn't take my eyes off the street. Then finally the engine went quiet. The headlights dimmed. For a second, I thought maybe they'd left. But then the driver's door opened. Mark stepped out, adjusting his jacket. Ryan followed, stretching like someone who wasn't in a hurry. They walked around to the sidewalk, still laughing. I ducked behind the curtain, barely breathing. Footsteps on the pavement. Slow, calm, like they were taking their time. They stopped right in front of the building. I heard one of them say something, too muffled to make out, and then the faint sound of keys jingling. Keys. I froze completely. There was no way they had a key to the front door. No way. But then I heard the soft click of it unlocking. I didn't think. I just moved. I grabbed my phone, ran into my bedroom, and locked the door. I dialed the police, whispering into the phone that someone was trying to break in. The operator kept asking me questions, but I barely answered. All I could hear was the sound of the front door creaking open. Voices filled the hallway now, muffled but close. Ryan's low laugh, the driver's heavy footsteps. Then silence. I stayed pressed against the wall, clutching my phone, praying for sirens. Every second stretched longer than it should have. I thought about jumping out the window, but I was on the 2nd floor. Too high to land safely, too low to escape if they saw me. Finally, I heard it, faint at first, then growing louder. Sirens. The footsteps stopped, then hurried movements, the sound of the door opening again, closing. By the time the police arrived, the street was empty. The car was gone. I told them everything. They checked my door, the locks, the hallway. Nothing was broken. No sign anyone had forced their way in. They searched outside, but there was no car matching the description I gave. When I tried to show them the app, the history was still gone, like the trip never existed. They took my statement, said they'd look into it, but I could tell by their tone they didn't believe me. Maybe they thought I'd been drinking too much. After they left, I sat in the dark, staring out the window for hours. Nothing came back. The next morning, I barely slept. I checked my phone again. The app was working fine now, except for one new notification. It was a message. From an unknown number. It said, "Hope you got home safe." And under it was a photo, taken from the street outside my building. It showed my window, curtains half closed. The light inside glowing just enough to see my shadow standing there. It started like one of those first dates that feels easy. Not amazing, not awkward, just okay. His name was Alex. We matched a week earlier, exchanged a few boring texts, then finally decided to meet. I picked the restaurant. Small, quiet, one of those candlelit places with old jazz music playing and walls covered in random art that doesn't match. He was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window. He looked normal enough, better than his photos actually. Button-down shirt, clean-shaven, polite smile. He stood up when I walked over, pulled out my chair, all that. It felt almost too formal, but I didn't mind. The first few minutes were fine. The usual small talk. Where do you work? What do you like to do? How long have you been in the city? I remember thinking how calm he was. He never fidgeted, never looked at his phone, never broke eye contact. Most people have those small human habits, checking their watch, sipping their drink, laughing at random moments, but he just didn't. I brushed it off. Maybe he was just nervous or trying to make a good impression. The food took a while, which he joked about, saying the waiter must have fallen asleep in the kitchen. He laughed, but it didn't sound natural. I laughed too, mostly out of politeness. The waiter eventually brought our plates, steak for him, pasta for me, and poured more wine before walking away. We started eating, talking about movies. He told me he didn't watch many, said he preferred real things. Whatever that meant. The music in the background was soft, some old trumpet song, looping low. For a while, it was almost relaxing. Then, around halfway through dinner, something weird happened. He made another joke about the waiter taking forever to bring napkins, and I looked over to agree. But when I glanced toward the counter, it was empty. No waiter. No bartender. I figured maybe they'd stepped into the kitchen, but then I noticed how quiet everything was. The music had stopped. Completely. No jazz, no chatter from the other tables, no clinking dishes. Just silence. I looked around and realized the restaurant was empty. Every table gone. Plates, glasses, candles, all there. But no people. No waiters, no other diners. Even the lights felt different than before. I turned back toward him, my stomach tightening. He was staring at me, completely still. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. I stood up, trying to spot anyone through the kitchen doors. They were slightly open, but I couldn't see anyone inside. The hallway beyond looked dark. I turned to tell him something, maybe that we should leave, but his face had changed. The polite smile was gone. His eyes looked sharper, focused. He said it softly, almost like a sigh. Something about how it was finally quiet now. How we could finally talk. The way he said it made my skin crawl. I laughed nervously, trying to make light of it, but he didn't laugh back. He leaned forward slightly, hands flat on the table, watching me the way someone watches something fragile, not with affection, but with ownership. The silence pressed down hard. I could hear the faint hum of the overhead lights and the ticking of the wall clock, slow and deliberate. I told him I needed to check something in the kitchen. He didn't answer, just tilted his head like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. The moment I turned toward the door, the air in the room felt heavier, like walking through thick fog. My footsteps echoed too loudly against the tile. The kitchen door creaked when I pushed it open. Inside, nothing. Empty counters, cold burners, not even a sound from the refrigerator. It looked like no one had cooked there in days. When I came back out, he was still sitting in the exact same position. Hands flat, eyes forward, expression blank. I asked where everyone went. He said they were gone. Said they wouldn't bother us now. I told myself he was joking, but it didn't sound like one. I looked around again, hoping maybe I'd missed someone. A shadow, a shape, anything. But it was just us, surrounded by empty tables and half-melted candles. The smell of food hung thick in the air, stale and wrong now. Then I noticed something else. The food on our plates wasn't steaming anymore. It was cold. Not warm, not lukewarm, cold, like it had been sitting there for hours. I checked my phone, thinking maybe I'd lost track of time. The screen was black. Dead. His phone sat face down on the table. I thought about grabbing it, but the idea of reaching that close to him made my stomach twist. He was still watching me. His voice broke the silence again. Calm, low, steady. He said something about how he hated interruptions. That this was better. That the noise outside ruined everything. He kept talking, but I wasn't listening anymore. My pulse was too loud in my ears. I backed toward the door, forcing a smile, pretending I needed to use the restroom. He nodded almost approvingly, like I'd said the right thing. As soon as I stepped out of the dining room, I ran. Through the kitchen, out the back exit. The cold air outside hit like a shock. My lungs felt like they couldn't catch up. I didn't stop running until I reached the next street. When I finally looked back, the restaurant looked completely normal. Lights on, a couple walking past the windows, music playing faintly again. I stood there for a full minute, trying to make sense of it. Then I saw him. He was standing inside, near the window, watching me. Not moving, not smiling, just watching. I turned and left. By the time I got home, I'd convinced myself it was all in my head. That maybe I had too much wine, maybe the lights flickered, maybe the staff had gone on break. I kept trying to make it sound logical. The next morning, I checked my phone. No missed calls, no messages from him. I opened the app where we'd met. His profile was gone, completely erased, like it never existed. I searched the restaurant's name online, hoping to distract myself. The first result stopped me cold. The address matched, but the article was dated 6 months ago. It said the place had closed after a gas leak killed 2 staff and a customer during dinner service. It listed their names. The customer's name was Alex. I read the article again and again, but the details didn't change. The date, the photo, the description, all exactly the same restaurant I've been sitting in. That night, I walked past the street just to see it one more time. The restaurant was dark, windows boarded up. No lights, no music, no people. But through one of the gaps in the boards, I could see the faint glow of a candle. And for just a second, a man sitting by the window, smiling, waiting. The night started fine. Like any average first date, you say yes to just to see what happens. Her name was Lily. We'd been talking for a couple of weeks, and she seemed cool enough online. Her messages were short, a little sarcastic, but funny. She wasn't like the others who talked in emojis and overused lol. She typed like she meant what she said. That alone made me curious. We met at a small cafe near her place, one of those quiet spots with fake plants and mismatched chairs. She looked better in person, hair in a loose bun, hoodie half-zipped, this calm way about her. She wasn't trying hard. I liked that. The date went surprisingly smooth. We talked for over an hour, mostly about random stuff. She was really into sketching and said she preferred people's faces over scenery because faces tell you things walls can't. I didn't really get it, but it sounded interesting. It was dark when we left. The streetlights reflected off the wet pavement from earlier rain, and she offered to walk me halfway. Then, halfway turned into her pointing out her apartment building and saying I should come up for a bit since it was cold. I hesitated for like half a second before agreeing. Her building was old, not falling apart, but definitely with that creepy charm where every hallway looks the same. The elevator had a buzzing sound, and the floor lights flickered as we went up. She laughed about it, said the place had character. Her apartment was small but tidy. Dim lights, a soft orange lamp in the corner, the smell of coffee still fresh. There were plants on the windowsill, sketches pinned to the walls, and a folded blanket on the couch. Everything about the place looked normal, maybe too normal, like a showroom version of comfort. I kicked my shoes off at the door, and that's when I heard it, the sound of a lock sliding shut behind me. Not one click. Two. She turned the deadbolt in the chain. I thought nothing of it at first. Maybe to being careful, like she said later. She gave me a quick smile and said it was for safety. But then something about the sound bothered me. I looked at the door again. The locks were heavy-duty, the kind that needed a key. I stepped closer, pretending to hang my jacket, and that's when I saw it. The locks were facing the wrong direction. Both bolts, the deadbolt and the chain, were set to be locked from the outside. I blinked, thinking maybe I was seeing it wrong, but no. The screws, the orientation, the keyhole, everything was flipped. Whoever had installed them did it deliberately. She walked into the kitchen, humming something under her breath, completely casual. I tried to act normal, my pulse picked up hard. I told myself maybe it was an old building thing, or maybe the landlord messed up. But that didn't explain why the chain was also reversed. She came back with 2 glasses of wine, smiling like nothing was weird. I took mine, mostly to keep my hands busy. She sat on the couch and motioned for me to sit too. I did, keeping my eyes on the door for a second too long. She noticed. I could feel it. She started talking about her art again, showing me some of her sketches. People's faces. Strangers mostly. A few looked familiar, but I couldn't place from where. Then she flipped to one that looked eerily like me. Not perfect, but close enough. Same jawline, same jacket I was wearing right then. She laughed when I froze, said she just liked drawing people she met. But the shading around the eyes was off. Too dark, too hollow. Like the version of me in her drawing wasn't alive. My stomach tightened. I set the sketchbook down gently and asked how long she'd lived here. She said not long, a few months maybe. Her voice was calm, too calm, like she'd said the same line 100 times. I looked around again. The apartment was nice, but something about it felt temporary. No photos, No mail, nothing that tied her to the space. The books on the shelf were blank, just covers, no titles. That's when I noticed the window. There were bars on the outside. Not decorative, actual steel bars bolted into the frame. I glanced at the door again. The locks gleamed in the lamplight. It hit me that if I needed to get out, I couldn't. I'd have to break something, and she was sitting between me and the kitchen where anything sharp might be. She started asking strange questions. If anyone knew I was there, if I'd lived alone, if I'd ever done something I regretted. She asked them like she was studying me, eyes flicking between my face and her sketchbook. I laughed them off, pretending it didn't bother me, but she didn't laugh back. Her tone changed. She said most people didn't pay attention to details, that they missed what was right in front of them. Her eyes flicked toward the door, and I followed her gaze. There were scratches around the handle, faint but real, like someone had tried to claw it open. That's when I stood up. I said I should get going, that it was late. She didn't argue, just smiled that same soft smile and said I could leave if I wanted. I turned the knob. It didn't move. I tried again, harder. Nothing. The bolt didn't budge. She sat there, watching, hands folded neatly in her lap. Her voice was calm, quiet. She said it only opened from the other side. I froze, staring at her. My heartbeat felt like it was in my throat. She stood up slowly, walked past me toward the kitchen, and disappeared behind the wall. I looked around for something heavy. My eyes landed on one of the potted plants. I grabbed it and slammed it at the lock. The ceramic cracked, dirt splattering everywhere. Still nothing. Then I heard the sound of metal scraping. When she came back, she wasn't holding wine anymore. She was holding a small key, dangling it by her fingers like she was thinking about something. She asked if I trusted her. I didn't answer. The air between us was thick. I took a slow step backward toward the window. She tilted her head, eyes flicking there, almost amused. I knew the bars meant that wasn't an option. So I ran for the bathroom, slammed the door and locked it, even though it felt useless. My hands shook as I scanned for another exit. There was a small vent near the ceiling, too small to crawl through. Footsteps approached the door. Slow. She whispered something, couldn't make out what. Then the sound of keys again, turning slowly. The handle rattled. Once, twice. I didn't wait. I threw my weight against the window, hitting it again and again until the glass cracked. It wasn't big enough to squeeze through, but I screamed for help anyway, hoping someone in the building would hear. She didn't yell back. She just knocked. 3 slow taps, then silence. When I finally heard voices outside, neighbors or someone responding, I screamed louder. By the time the police got there, the door was open, the apartment empty. No Lily, no sketchbook. They said no one by that name lived there. The landlord swore the unit had been vacant for months. But on the coffee table, sitting neat and clean, was a drawing. It was me. Same jacket, same expression, same fear. And right next to it, taped to the edge of the paper, was a small, shiny key. I wasn't planning to go to his place that night. It just sort of happened. We met a few times before. Nothing serious, just dinners, a few drinks, walking around late and talking about dumb things that didn't matter. His name was Chris. He was quiet but funny, and there was something about how calm he always seemed that made me feel like he had it together. That night, we went to a small sushi place near his building. It was one of those low-lit restaurants where the music is just loud enough to fill the awkward silences. The date was fine. Better than fine, actually. He told me about his photography hobby, said he liked taking pictures with old cameras because they made moments feel more real. I didn't think much of it. When the night ended, he offered to walk me to my car. We passed by his building on the way, and he asked if I wanted to come up for a bit, just to hang out. I hesitated, but I said sure. I wasn't getting creepy vibes. His apartment was clean. Too clean, maybe. Everything was perfectly organized. No dust, no clutter, no stray socks on the floor. It smelled faintly like cedar and something metallic. There were cameras on shelves, old film rolls in jars, stacks of polaroids on his coffee table. He laughed when I asked if he actually used them all, said he was obsessed with documenting things. We sat on the couch for a bit, talking about random stuff. The TV was on mute, flashing light across the room. He poured some wine, and the conversation started to drift. I wasn't drunk, but I felt that kind of warm fuzziness where everything slows down. At one point, I asked to use the bathroom. He pointed down the hallway. The first thing I noticed when I stepped inside was how small it was. The walls were this dull cream color, and the light buzzed faintly. The mirror above the sink had smudges on it, like fingerprints someone half tried to wipe away. When I finished washing my hands, I turned to grab a towel. That's when I saw it. A wall covered in Polaroids. At first, I thought it was just some artsy decoration thing, like a photo collage. Dozens of pictures, maybe 100, all stuck neatly in rows from floor to ceiling. Most of them were slightly faded, the white borders yellowing at the edges. The photos looked random at first glance. Streets, faces, buildings, food, blurry nighttime shots. But then I noticed something strange. None of the people were smiling. Every single face looked mid-expression, like they'd been caught off guard. Some were looking straight at the camera. Some looked confused. Some looked terrified. I stepped closer. My heartbeat picked up. In one photo, there was a woman standing at a bus stop. In another, a guy walking his dog at night. One showed a girl sitting in her car with her window half rolled down, staring at something outside the frame. The lighting was the same in most of them. Dark, slightly off-center flash, like they'd been taken in secret. That's when it hit me. These weren't photos taken with people. They were photos taken of people. I scanned the wall again, moving closer, my stomach tightening with each one I recognized. Places I'd passed before. Corners I'd walked past on my way to work. Then my eyes landed on one near the center. It was me. I froze. The photo showed me at the sushi restaurant earlier that night. I was sitting by the window, chopsticks in hand, looking down at my plate. I remembered that exact moment. It was when he'd gone to the bathroom. The picture was clear, perfectly framed, like it had been taken from just a few feet away. Below it, in neat handwriting, was the date, tonight's date. My stomach dropped. I took a step back, staring at the wall like maybe I was imagining it. But there was no mistaking it. It was me. My same jacket, my same earrings, the same flicker of neon light from the restaurant sign reflected in the glass behind me. I turned toward the door, but the hallway was dark now. The sound of the tea had stopped. I called his name, trying to keep my voice calm. No response. I moved slowly toward the door, every step feeling heavier than the last. When I reached the edge of the hallway, the light from the living room barely reached me. The couch was empty. The wine glasses were gone. Then I heard it, the faint click of a camera. Not a phone, a Polaroid. I spun around, heart racing. The flash went off before I could see him. A bright white burst that blinded me for a second. When my eyes adjusted, he was standing at the other end of the hall. The camera hung loosely from his hands. He didn't say a word, just watched me. I stepped back, muttering something about leaving. My voice cracked halfway through. He didn't move. The air in the apartment felt heavy, like the walls were closing in. I took another step back, then another until I felt the bathroom door frame against my shoulder. My hand brushed the wall of photos. I felt the edges of one curl slightly under my fingertips, the photo of me. I yanked it off the wall and held it up. The ink hadn't fully dried yet. The back was still warm. I don't know what possessed me, but I ran. I pushed past him, down the hall, toward the front door. My fingers fumbled with the lock, my breath short. It opened after what felt like forever, and I bolted down the stairwell without looking back. When I reached the street, I didn't stop running until I was 3 blocks away. I ducked behind a convenience store, tried to catch my breath, clutching the Polaroid in my hand. It was still developing. The image was darker now, more defined. My face was turned slightly toward the camera this time, but I didn't remember looking up. That's when I noticed the reflection in the glass window behind me in the picture. He was there, standing right behind me. I didn't go home that night. I stayed at a friend's place, barely slept, checking the window every few minutes. When I went to the police the next morning, they took the photo, but said it wasn't enough proof of anything. When I checked the dating app later, his profile was gone. Completely wiped. No name, no chat history, nothing. A week later, I moved apartments. I still jump whenever I hear the sound of a camera click. But here's the part that messes with me the most. I threw that Polaroid away before I moved. And last week, I found another one taped to my new door. Same photo, same date. Except this time, there was something new written under it. Smile this time.